Oh my god, is that one desert in Ceará? Of course it is, but this clickbait really needs to stop. So in this video, I'm going to be going over my best Brazil guesses in no moving, panning or zooming, and talking about my thought process for each guess, so that you too could be making such guesses. Before we get into it, I recommend that you look up Brazil Plonking Guide, Brazil Insulators Presentation, and Brazil Urban Metas by Chairman and yours truly. All will be linked in the description. The way we're going to approach this is in categories. We're going to look into landscape and vegetation, infrastructure metas, crops, and coverage metas. So first off, let's take a look at the clickbait intro. So the first thing you notice is a so-called Ceará palm, scientifically known as a carnaúba. It is very widespread in the states of Ceará, Piauí, and Rio Grande do Norte. The dryness and the sheer number of carnaúbas could indicate that you're in a Russas dry patch in the northeast of Ceará. But carnaúba is far from being the only useful palm for region guessing in Brazil. Some other high-yield ones include babaçu, muriche, and macau. Our round here is spammed with babaçu, which only gives us a handful of options. Along with babaçu, we also have some red sandy soil and rolling hills, which many Brazilian pros will instantly recognize as maraba. So here's another round with a babaçu. I'm going to ignore the car meta and the pole meta, even though they easily solved the round for us anyway. So looking only at the natural aspects of the round, it looks very humid and maybe even marshy, with all the water on the sides of the road. Made me think of coastal-ish Maranhão, which can look like that from Santa Inês all the way to São Luís. So this round here, I'll let you just watch. This is what we pros call Teresina theorem. It's when you have one singular babaçu in the round, and you just click Teresina and it's there. Simple as that. So before we move on to other awesome palms that I've mentioned earlier, let me introduce you to a special someone. So you know babaçu, right? Well, you can call it its sister, I guess. This is an akuri palm. It comes from the same genus, Ataleia, although the species is different. Ataleia, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Back to the point. It is shorter and more stout than a babaçu, and you can hardly ever see its trunk. But the distribution is where it gets interesting. It is more common in the southern Amazon, in Mato Grosso and Mato Grosso do Sul, also in Bolivia, and from Bolivia it kind of crosses into Acre, and this is where the location is. Now that we're done with Ataleias, let's move on to Moriches. I do only have 2 locations that I can showcase, but this is a compilation of good guesses. This is not me just opening map making up and showing this to you, so I don't want to fake getting a certain location just for it to be featured. So since it's not really representative of its proper distribution, I highly recommend that you just open up iNaturalist, link will be in the description, not sponsored by the way, and look at it yourself, since this is the best way to learn, along with just playing the country yourself. Anyway, I did make you stare at this Roraima location for what, like 40 seconds now? And it's free, you would say? We have Roraima grass, we have Roraima mountain. Oh, I should just not include this. But you will get a Roraima forest, and you will see a Moriche there, and you will guess it correctly, because you just learned that. Yep, I'm taking full credit for that, if that happens. In this next location we have some Moriches as well, although a more important clue would be a triangular tree that we see in the back. That is a thing that they really like to do in Acre and Rondônia, so you would probably lean in one of those 2 states. If you know your Moriche hotspots though, this is a no-brainer. You just click Cruzeiro do Sul. Usually it's more recognizable when you have an acai palm in the round together with a Moriche, but this will do as well. Here we finally have some Macau palm action. People wrongfully call it a Paraguay palm, although it reaches all the way north to northern Maranhão and Piauí sometimes, so it's really not a good idea to be calling it that. It is very common in the states of Mato Grosso and Mato Grosso do Sul, Goiás, Tocantins, and Minas Gerais, as well as the northern states that I've mentioned. So as for this round, a ridge like this would probably point you more towards Tocantins, you know, Palmas Ridge for example. But in this round I was pretty sure. I kind of knew the ridge, but I just did not end up finding it confidently, so I just clicked somewhere southwest on Campo Grande, and it is kind of where I was, so let's include that. It's good to not fall for the Tocantins bait. So I'm thinking we really should pick up the pace and do a meta blitz perhaps. So I have 2 good soil metas for you. Listen up. First one is when you're very confident that you're in the northeast region and you have some green bushery, some cacti, and red soil, it is most likely that you're in the Rio Grande do Norte region. If you're in the south and you have a gray gravel road, you will most likely be in the state of Santa Catarina. You can also use rocks to region guess. For example, in the northeast, when you see rocks lying like that, it's probably Paraiba. If you're struggling to tell between Minas, Rio, and Espírito, while their landscape is quite similar, you will only see bold, bulbous mountains in the state of Espírito Santo. When you have kind of poor pavement and red soil on the sides of the road, and you're surrounded by different Amazonian palms, the chances are you're somewhere around Manaus. I usually go for the downtown city center guess because I don't want to bother with lining up the roads when I'm going for the fast-paced gameplay, so here it is, I guess. For the sake of keeping the video more or less concise, this is going to be the last bit for the landscape and vegetation chapter. And now we're gonna move on to infrastructure metas, which are probably my favorite. By far the strongest infrastructural meta in Brazil is pole meta. Almost everything about the pole can be used as a clue, from its shape and material to sometimes even its color, as well as some pole markings like paints and tags, as well as different lamp attachments and lamp heads. But the most important pole meta you can learn is pole supports. A pole support is a metal connector that reaches from the crossbeam to the body of a pole. Some states are more likely to have pole supports than others, and some don't have them at all. Let's take a look at this map right here and draw a couple of conclusions together. The northeast predominantly doesn't have supports, but if you do see them, you will most likely be in the state of Bahia. With this meta, you will be able to tell Acre from Rondônia, as Rondônia sometimes doesn't have supports or has a mix of them. You will also frequently see a mix of supports in Para, Paraná, and Roraima. So with this knowledge, let's jump into the first round. So in this round, we have a pole with no supports, which, as you could probably guess, would put us in the northeast of Brazil. We can narrow it down even more by taking a closer look at the insulators. Let's advise the Brazil insulator slideshow and make an educated guess based on that. Out of the possible options, only 2 can have no supports, with Alagoas being a little bit more likely. So this is where we're gonna guess. This might be a little hard to spot in NMPZ, so I'll zoom in for you. This is a mushroom insulator. A mushroom insulator looks like a hat of a mushroom and can be either white or brown. White variety can be seen in Bahia and Federal District, while brown in Pernambuco. So with a white mushroom and architecture being a lot more central, I'm gonna have to pull an MK person and guess Brasilia. It's time we talked about new pole type. This is a round pole. You probably know some things about it, but surely not enough. Here's a map from Plunkett that often gets overlooked. The biggest takeaway from this is that the majority of poles in São Paulo are round, as well as about half the poles in the adjacent states in the southeast region. In the south, round poles are reliably seen only in Rio Grande do Sul, which might solve some 50-50s with Paraná, for example. I think we can all agree that with a round pole and a divided highway, this round just screams São Paulo. Another lock with a round pole and a way more rural and agricultural look to it. So I think we're in the hilly fields of Arras. Now this is where it gets juicy. This specific pole top is something that's been missing from all the meta libraries for the longest time. It is very useful and is extremely commonly seen in the state of São Paulo. You might have seen this next meta featured in Diona's video on 5 South American metas that every pro should know. Nonetheless, let me talk about it too. What you see at the top of a pole here is a pencil pole top. It was believed to be a Rio-specific meta, but it can also be seen in Federal District and Manaus. It can be seen on standalone poles like that, and on poles with crossbeams. I decided to region guess Rio and lighten up the mountain. Just to be cool like that. Another pole type mentioned in the introduction to this chapter was a wooden pole. You can see 2 types of wooden poles in Brazil. Some that look more regular, like wooden poles elsewhere in the world, and some that are made of peculiar trees, to say the least. While the latter tend to be in the Amazonian states, and we also happen to have their distribution available. So let's take a look at that. Well, in the Amazon, you're most likely to see wood poles in Amazonas and Roraima. But I actually opt to go for a riskier guess, and let me explain why. I did not feel like this was Amazonas just because it was way too open, as most locations around Manaus are a little claustrophobic to my liking. I also rule out Roraima because the nut tree would be quite unlikely to see in that state. So I decided to go for Rondônia despite only the 10% chance, and Unsurprisingly, it just works out. At this point, we're going a little too heavy with the Amazon stuff, but bear with me, this is a good one. If you've looked through the plonking guide attentively, you might have seen this meta there, but it's not really complete. So the way the lamp is attached to a pole in this round is called a Mato Grosso's arm. It is very commonly seen in both states of Mato Grosso. But according to Plunkett, you can also spot it in Pernambuco. According to me, though, you might also spot it in a couple more states. Just a handful. Perhaps 10. Bear in mind, though, that this research is not really conclusive, as I was mostly mapping the capitals and some other big cities for a different project. But it's up to you whether you want to trust it or not. I'm gonna trust it for this round. As I stated earlier, this is the Amazon, and it just happens that in the Amazon, the most likely state to have Mato Grosso's arm is Para, so I'm going to guess in Belém. So I'm gonna close off this category with a classic. As you might know, Brazil has many state and city-specific lamps, and this perhaps is the most legendary one of them. This is a Boa Vista lamp, and the way you can tell it belongs in the city is by its color. In fact, Roraima has many lamps that have the same shape, but each color corresponds to a specific city. Boa Vista's color is red, so this is where we're going to guess. Of course, there's many more infrastructure metas to share, with all capital cities having some city-specific meta and some random-ass towns having some for some reason as well. But for the sake of the video and for the sake of my future content, please subscribe. I'm going to leave it until the next video, where I'm going to be playing Brazil City Streaks, trying to beat my own world record, not to toot my own horn. Moving on to a very short and shy category, crops. I feel like people are just good at Brazilian crops, so I'm not gonna go too deep into it. So in the first round here, we're surrounded by corn. Corn is produced in many states in Brazil, and I'm surprised this is not on the Plonky guide actually. So let me pull up the receipts. As you can see, most of the corn in Brazil is produced in Mato Grosso, but Mato Grosso agricultural fields are usually much flatter and the soil seems to be smoother. This is why I'm leaning more towards the south, Paraná for example. Paraná has a few hotspots of corn that I'm aware of. For example, in between Maringá and Londrina is a good one, but with its dark red soil and hillier landscape, I'm leaning more towards Cascavel. The next crop is one that literally everyone knows. I could have left it out, but it would feel quite incomplete without sugarcane, so let's just talk about how to tell apart the northern region from São Paulo. And when I say the northern region, I mean of course this belt from Sergipe to Pernambuco. The north tends to grow sugarcane on rolling hills, with the soil there tending to be a lot paler. The south, however, is usually flat with red soil like here, which is why I'm just sending São Paulo. And that is it for crops. There are of course some other useful crops in Brazil, but I feel like most of them are already featured on the Plonky guide, so you can just go and look at that. And I'm not gonna bother taking fake footage just to showcase some coffee for you. That is why we're moving on to coverage metas. Many favor them, many hate them, but you gotta learn them if you want to be good at Brazil. The thing about coverage metas, of course, is the fact that with new coverage being released almost monthly, some of the metas might get overwritten, which is not the case with any metas featured in this video. With coverage being released this frequently, I'm also hesitant to include any 2024 coverage metas in this video because I feel like I'm just gonna miss something because I haven't seen some new releases, which is why I'm only focusing on 2023 and previously. For the longest time, white car has been the most important car for region guessing in Brazil, as it's only spotted in a handful of states and they are so drastically different from each other that you're never gonna mess them up anyway. So in the Amazon, those states are Acre and Rondônia. You can kinda mess them up, but it doesn't really matter. In the central region, it is seen in the south of Goiás, spilling a little bit in Minas Gerais. In the northeast, it's spotted south of Natal City in Rio Grande do Norte, and there are a bunch of fake white cars that I'm also gonna talk about in a little bit. With abundance of nut trees in around, you can probably easily tell that this is Amazonia. Now all that's left to do is pick between Acre and Rondônia. Rondônia coverage only gets this green kind of just near Porto Velho and west of it, so I'm going for the optimal guess, which is Acre. White car coverage in Acre doesn't extend too far north from Rio Branco, so Rio Branco is probably the optimal guess here. With how central-ish this next white car location looks, it can only really be southern Goiás. Another white car location, but a drastically different landscape, this time much drier and much more northern looking. So hence why we're going to guess south of Natal City in Rio Grande do Norte. Enough real cars, let's move on to a fake one. So this car is wrongfully considered by many people to be white, although it is not. It is frequently seen in the north of Rio Grande do Sul state, in between cities of Ariquemes and Passo Fundo. The next car meta is one that literally everyone should know. It is a mapa blur. A mapa blur can be recognized by the striped car that has a frontal blur on the right side of the screen. Be careful though, there's a bunch of similar coverage in 2024 that extends from Tocantins to Maranhão and Para, so just be sure before you instasend. Another important car meta that is very useful to know is exposed striped car in Paraná. In the state, you might see exposed striped car around the city of Cascavel. There are plenty of more spots in Brazil where a car may be exposed, but this is perhaps the second most important one. You might think that the car is white, but in fact it is blue. So blue exposed car is really common around the city of Rio Verde in the southwestern Goiás. Last but not least is more of a coverage meta than a car meta. You might probably know that Rondônia coverage can get quite hazy. But when it gets to this hazy when you can barely see anything, it might mean that you're on the 319 highway going north out of Porto Velho to Humaita district. The road is also easily line-upable, so getting this haze is pretty much a guaranteed good score. At this point, I've covered most of what I wanted to and most of what I could in just one video. So if you want to see more of this educational content with me just showing off a little bit, please consider subscribing. Editing and making this video has been a blast like no other, so I promise to really stick around this time, if you promise as well. Bye bye!